Hey, folks, you have a cat? Do they have digestive issues? Are they throwing up their food? Or is your cat just one of those very picky cats and in need of an actual diet upgrade? Well, we've all been there, those of us who own cats. You should check out our next sponsor, Smalls. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. To get 50% off your first order plus free shipping, head to smalls.com and use our promo code MAJORITY. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. But it's not just healthy. Cats love it. Before my cat passed away, I felt good. Like the last couple of weeks, he had a chance to enjoy it.
Meals,
and Matt's cat's gone crazy over Smalls.
Fiendish whenever I put that stuff down.
If you're still not a believer in Smalls, New York Magazine called Smalls the best cat food according to veterinarians. BuzzFeed said my cats went completely ballistic for this stuff. Smalls also has a bunch of amazing treats and snacks you can add to your order. After switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements, and that, of course, is a big deal. If you have a particularly picky cat, Smalls has a sampler, so your cat can try everything Smalls has to offer. Tell them about that squirt stuff.
Oh, yeah. You refrigerate this stuff. It comes in like actually yogurt in this type of form factor, but you squeeze it on the dry food, and it's like a little broth that makes it way more appetizing to cats.
They love it. And the team at Smalls is so confident your cat's going to love their product, you can try it for risk-free. That means they'll refund you if your cat won't eat their food. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. Head to smalls.com. Use promo code MAJORITY at checkout for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you're going to find, but you have to use our code MAJORITY for 50% off your first order. One last time, that's promo code MAJORITY, 50% off your first order plus free shipping, smalls.com. Link in the podcast and YouTube description. Now, time for the program.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people and in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. On the program today, Tariq Habash, former senior official at the Department of Education under President Biden, founder and director of the organization A New Policy. He was one of the Biden administration people who resigned over Biden's Gaza policy. Then we'll be talking to MarkAlain Dery, Dr. MarkAlain Dery, infectious disease specialist, founder of community radio station WHIV-FM in New Orleans, creator of the new NoiseFilter podcast about the various diseases that we have to worry about now that apparently our Health and Human Services Secretary believes that you can take care of all of it with tallow fried potatoes. Also on the program today, Europe retaliates to Trump's metal tariffs, and Trump hits a new low in polls on handling of the economy. New low all time for him. Meanwhile, House passes a fake, clean, continuing resolution now to the Senate, where those senators that you have called and will call today if you have not called must vote for cloture, vote against cloture. Though it looks like the Democrats are about to cave. Trump and Musk slashing the Department of Education, putting student debt and student debt relief into total disarray. Trump buys a Tesla and Musk gives him a $100 million rebate. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is trying to transfer Mahmoud Khalil's case to Louisiana, where he's been disappeared to. Ukraine announces support for a 30-day ceasefire as U.S. resumes aid. Russia yet to respond. New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen to retire. And in the wake of Mayor Adams' New York City Mayor Adams' quid pro quo deal, the Department of Justice is going to slash its public corruption unit. NOAA to cut another 1,000 employees, and the EPA to close all environmental justice offices and terminate $20 billion in greening grants. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, hump day. I don't know. Every day feels like it's, even Friday doesn't feel like hump day anymore. Emma is out today. She'll be back tomorrow. We've got a lot of things to get to, not including our guests. I want to talk to our guests both about a new policy, which is that organization that he started with Josh Paul, who was the State Department official who resigned over the Biden administration's Israel and Gaza policy, but also what's going on at the Education Department. A lot of things to cover today. In the meantime, the House yesterday passed its continuing resolution. It's being somewhat reported as if it's a clean budget continuing resolution. It is not. Continuing resolution would just mean that the budget as it exists today would carry through, and this is a 6-month extension. Now, the other thing is that currently those budgets are not being met in terms of the appropriation because the White House is interfering with the deliverance of that money. But on top of that, this bill would cut non-defense spending by $13 billion for the rest of the fiscal year. This is the way it's being reported. But we are 6 months into the fiscal year. So that means $26 billion worth of annualized cuts to non-defense spending. And $6 billion increase to defense spending for the remainder of this fiscal year, which is a $12 billion annualized increase in defense budget. So it heads to the Senate. Here is, and everybody in the Senate's being quiet about it. Here is a clip of Manu Raju talking to at least House members about this continuing resolution. Now, understand, it's easier for the Democrats to vote against this because they have no real influence on the outcome by voting against it. Jared Golden was the only one who, Democrat from Maine, who voted for the continuing resolution. Massey from Kentucky, the only one who voted against it. Donald Trump, incidentally, wants him eliminated because you cannot have anybody who shows that they can continue to exist if they defy him in the Republican Party. And I'm not being facetious about that. I think that's why he's so obsessed with Massey, because Massey shows that you can actually vote against Trump. Here is Manu Raju talking to Pramila Jayapal and AOC in the interim between that House vote and the Senate vote.
They should refuse to allow this bill to pass in the Senate.
If they don't?
I think there's going to be huge backlash from across the country, and I think all of them will have to deal with the consequences of that.
The Republicans have the White House, the Senate, and the House. If they want to do this, and if they want to screw over the American people, they can do this with their votes and their party. I do not believe that Democrats should participate.
And the idea that that we're hearing from Senate Democrats now, and nobody's coming out explicitly saying it because they're all too cowardly about it. But the idea that we can't have a government shutdown, we are experiencing a government shutdown right now. When the government, when they do not fund the government, and they don't have a budget, there are some things that still operate. Essential items. So it's really ultimately a matter of degree. It's a much bigger deal to have a government shutdown. But Republicans control the House, they control the Senate. If the Senate got out in front of this and started messaging this, that we cannot sit by and watch the White House just willy-nilly cut stuff. $20 billion in legislation that was passed by and signed and exists. It's law. Spend that $20 billion on these grants. And the EPA head, Lee Zeldin, just cut it. Just got rid of all the environmental justice offices that have been around since 2013. They're cutting half of the education department. That's just today. On top of which, they've cut $1 billion in food purchases by local schools. Play this clip. This is Trump AG Secretary and Project 2025 author, Brooke Rollins.
There's another thing here, right up your alley. USDA cancels $1 billion in local food purchasing for schools and food banks. How do you justify that?
Well, listen, I think it's really important. And of course, the left is doing what the left does. These were COVID era programs. These were additional funds. And then under Biden, more and more and more and more money. So just yesterday, we're canceling more contracts on food justice for trans people in New York and San Francisco. Obviously, that's different than the food programs in the schools, but it is.
Oh, pause it. Wait a second. Now I'm confused. The reason why we're trying to attack trans people is to protect the kids in the schools. Isn't that, I mean, have I got this right?
Now we've got to take food out of their mouths.
We've got to attack the trans people to protect the kids. Except for also, what we're also doing is we found that if we eliminate the kids too, then the trans people can't get to them because they're worried about other things.
The trans attacks have always been in part an attack on public schools to get people to, like in Texas, for instance, hate their schools or distrust their schools that they like and don't want to be made into charter schools.
I mean, I think we could go across the board. The attack on trans people is an attack on government.
Yep.
Go back just a little bit because she's giving you the justification why they have cut $1 billion from programs where schools purchase food locally. In other words, not from some necessarily massive private contractor.
Funds, and then under Biden, more and more and more and more money. So just yesterday, we're canceling more contracts on food justice for trans people in New York and San Francisco. Obviously, that's different than the food programs in the schools, but it is really important. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on nutrition programs for lower income and socioeconomically disadvantaged kids. But the Biden administration used that to often push money out, taxpayer dollars out, that is not reaching its intended target. So that new program that came in the last few years, again, trying to spend more and more money, we're pulling that back. As we have always said, if we are making mistakes, we will own those mistakes and we will reconfigure. But right now, from what we are viewing, that program was non-essential. that it was a new program and that it was an effort by the left to continue spending taxpayer dollars that were not necessary.
I don't know how long she spoke there for. Was that like about 90 seconds? And as far as I could tell, not a single justification for canceling that program. She could have been talking about anything. She could have been talking about the program that funds whatever it is, that Trump administration person who does the walkway videos on Instagram in her office. And it would have had the exact same relevance. And at the end, she could say, and if it's a mistake, it's a mistake. We'll fix it. To cut $1 billion from school food funding. And it's not like these schools are going to be like, oh, well, that's all right. We had about 4 or 5 other backup situations to provide food. No, it just means there'll be students who will not get meals. That's it, period. And not only, obviously, is this wrong, but it is completely contrary to the statutes of our country. They don't have a right to willy-nilly cut these things, and the Senate's got to stand up and do something about it. Give me that number again. It is 202. You need to call your Senate offices. And it doesn't look good right now. I'm not going to lie to you. 202 224-3121. 202-224-3121. Call your Senate offices right now and tell them no on the continuing resolution. You're watching them. You can see what they're doing. They need to fight. Because if they don't do this and they allow Musk to continue to cut willy-nilly, incidentally, he's also announced that he's coming for Social Security. They have no leverage to stop him. None. Zero. None. Then they're just going to sit passively by and watch the reconciliation bill pass. They have no leverage. Now, I know this was James Carville's plan. Don't do anything. Just hang out. Watch and see. Don't be stupid. Don't worry about the kids getting their food. The EPA, do you know what's happening at that EPA? I know we got to take a break in a second. Aside from what's going on with NOAA, if the weather's not that important for farmers or for people dealing with storms or fisheries. You don't need to know anything about hurricanes or tornadoes. Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't pay for the app? You didn't pay the subscription for the app on the private service? No tornado warnings for you. EPA plans to close all environmental justice offices. I mean, this is what the right will consider DEI or whatever it is. There are these offices have been open for 3 decades. And what they do is they ease pollution that burdens poor and minority communities, which are frequently located near highways, power plants, industrial plants, and other polluting facilities. Now, the phraseology is a little bit backwards. Because these communities are not located near highways, power plants, industrial plants, and other polluting facilities. Highways, power plants, industrial plants, and other polluting facilities are located towards these communities. And they continue to keep them poor, and they keep them incredibly unhealthy. It's not vice versa. These communities existed, and then because they had no political power, that's where essentially the garbage dump goes, the incinerator goes, the power plant goes, the highway goes. How are you going to stop it? Sorry, you don't have the political power to stop it. Studies have shown that people who live in those communities have higher rates of asthma, heart disease, other health problems compared with the national average. That is not a coincidence. Zeldin said this is discrimination. Last month, he put 170 or so of these people who work in that division on leave, and now they'll probably lose their job as they, as the EPA basically cuts all this stuff. The EPA and Justice Department dropped a lawsuit last week against a petrochemical plant that the Biden administration had launched, argued that the plant increased the cancer risk in a predominantly black community in Louisiana. Well, it'd be discriminatory to pursue that lawsuit because we don't have a lawsuit like that against that petrochemical plant for white people who get cancer because that plant wasn't located near a white community. Also, last night, Zeldin terminated $20 billion in climate change grants that had been issued by the Biden administration under the Inflation Reduction Act. They're being sued. Climate United Fund received a $7 billion grant of the program and has taken the agency to court to access that money. The EPA said the termination, this according to Politico, was based on substantial concerns about the structure of the Biden administration's greenhouse gas reduction fund, which was statutorily authorized in 2002 under the IRA. EPA can cancel contracts under specific legally defined examples of waste, fraud, and abuse by grantees, but this is going to be shocking. The only thing they found was substantial concerns. That's how specific it got. The person noted, this is someone who was discussing anonymously because they don't want to get targeted by the administration. The person noted EPA instead focused its argument on the program's structure and oversight, not on the actions of the grantees. That's going to court, I think, today. The point is the Senate going to be involved in any of this? Are Democratic lawmakers going to be involved in any of this? Or are they just going to sit back and watch the court cases? Because if so, they should all just get podcasts. Because they're not doing anything more than we're doing here. Honestly. In fact, I would argue we do that better. We cover what's going on better. But if they want to get into the podcast business, because it doesn't seem like they're doing anything else. Call your Senate office, 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. All right. Got a couple of sponsors, and then we'll be talking to Tariq Habash, former senior official at the Department of Education under Biden, founder and director of the organization, A New Policy. He resigned from the Biden administration over Gaza. And then later we'll be talking to MarkAlain Dery, doctor of infectious diseases. Somebody asked me the other day, like, why did you, when you were talking about that ad for Nutrafol, why'd you have Nutrafol lying around the office? I've told the story so many times that I think people are bored of it, but maybe not everybody knows it. Several years ago, Nutrafol reached out to us to, this must have been 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, to sponsor the program. And I didn't feel like I was worried about my thinning hair. Michael, I suggested him, hey, man, do you want to try this? He was like, no. So we had a couple of bottles in the office. I started taking it a couple of years ago. And then they came back to us, and I was like, sure, I'll advertise for it. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. It is trusted by over 1.5 million people. One of those is me. You will see thicker, stronger, faster growing hair and less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. Thinning hair is different for men and women, so a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men and women that are tailored to different life stages, such as postpartum or menopause, and lifestyle factors, such as a plant-based lifestyle, so you can get just what you need. Both Emma and I know separately women who have used Nutrafol and had a lot of success with it. And for me, I have noticed less shedding. And I'm at that age now where it's like I need every little bit of help I can get. But the best part for me, it is physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning, stress, which I have, hormones, which I think are they diminished, or I don't know what's happening with my hormones, but they're not great. Aging, I have that. Nutrition, barely. Lifestyle, probably not conducive to anything healthy. And metabolism, which has always been a problem for me. Through whole body health. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping. When you go to Nutrafol.com, enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. We'll put that in the YouTube and podcast description. And at majority.fm. Also, this has gotten a workout in my house. Saul's been sick. He's been sick now, off and on now, for the past 5 weeks. Sore throat, whatever. It's really the only thing that would allow me to share with him my Manacora honey. Because usually it's just for me. Manacora honey is unlike any other honey you've ever tasted. It is delicious. It is also incredibly good for you. Manacora honey is rich, it's creamy. It is, like I say, the best honey you've ever tasted. Has almost like the consistency of caramel. It's produced by Manacora's master beekeepers in the remote forests of New Zealand. Manacora honey is different than other types of honey. It is from bees that collect nectar from the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand. It has powerful nutrients which support immunity and gut health. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey, which have a decent amount as well. There's a special antibacterial compound called MGO that also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. Manacora tests, third-party tests every single harvest for MGO and makes these results available through their QR system or right on their bottles. It's a game changer. All you need is 1 heaped teaspoon every morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka. And of course, it's great for tea. It's great to put on in your yogurt. It's great to be used in any other way. And it's perfectly healthy for you to take more, eat more of it. I will cop to having a spoonful probably most evenings, particularly when I have my kid with me, just because I feel like I deserve it. Thanks to Manacora for supporting the Majority Report. Now it's easier than ever to try Manacora honey. Head to manacora.com/majority. Get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, which incidentally are great for kids' lunches, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's Manacora, MANUKORA.com/majority, $25 off your starter kit. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. Quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Tariq Habash, former senior official at the Department of Education under Biden, who left in protest of Biden's Gaza policy and set up the organization with Josh Paul called A New Policy. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Want to welcome to the program Tariq Habash. He is a former senior official at the Department of Education under President Biden. Now founder and director of the organization A New Policy with Josh Paul. Tariq, welcome to the program. You were a former senior official at the Department of Education, but not because Kamala Harris lost the election and Donald Trump came in. You were former while Joe Biden was still president. Tell us why.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sam. And that's exactly right. I was at the Department of Education. I was a political appointee, and I was there from the very beginning of the administration, working on federal policy related to racial equity, to higher education, to student debt. And I left in January of 2024 because of the president's policies towards Palestinians in Gaza. As a Palestinian American myself, I felt very deeply the connection with what was happening and how our policies were not only bad for Palestinians in the region, but bad for Americans and bad for American policy. And despite my efforts to communicate that to the White House, through the secretary himself even, it was very clear that the administration had really no willingness to change on those policies. And the reality was there was a political barrier there. There was a political unwillingness to recognize not just the humanity of Palestinians, but what we were doing as being just outside of, American interests and American values. And when, Josh and I started talking about what we were experiencing, him at the State Department, me at Education, it was very clear the political barriers were the fundamental problem. And this is something that spans beyond partisan issues. This is an issue, unfortunately, that Democrats and Republicans have really been poor on for a long time. And I think we recognized in that moment that we needed to build an organization to address the political realities, that we needed American policy to reflect the interests of everyday Americans. And that means not sending billions of dollars of weapons to kill Palestinian children on the other side of the world when, people are starving here at home, when people are suffering from job loss and inflation and housing issues here at home. I think that message was partially communicated through the election, but I think even now we're still seeing a disconnect between the Democratic Party and its base, between the Republican Party and its voters. I think there are millions of Americans that don't feel like they have a political home. And so we wanted to create a new policy to do just that, to build on this movement that we've been seeing for over a year across the country, that is responsive to those facts and realities for everyday Americans.
Yeah, I want to, I think just add to what you said that I don't know that the entirety of Harris's loss is a function of that policy, but it certainly, undoubtedly, was a major contributing factor. And recent polling, this is what is fascinating. Donald Trump is not going to be punished by large parts of the Republican Party for his policies towards Gaza and the Palestinians, and the idea that we'll level the place and just put up hotels, and Palestinians will find some other place to live, wherever it is he thinks that they should go. The Republican Party it's not inconsistent with their worldview. Recent polling, I think it was Gallup, came out and showed that really a large majority of Democrats now are of the mind that we need to change our policy towards Israel and the Palestinian people. In fact, they're more sympathetic with the Palestinians than they are with the Israelis. And it has made, I think there was always a slight sort of like tension between certainly the Democratic base and where Democratic politicians were with in terms of Israel and Gaza. Although I have to say Biden went much further than I think that any other Democrat I've seen in allowing Israel free hand. But they're really out of sync now, and it's hard to imagine that this issue is going to have any less salience going forward than it does today for the Democratic Party. And that is very problematic for the Democratic Party.
I totally agree. I would argue that it would probably have more salience based on what we're seeing happening here at home.
It's hard to imagine it won't.
Yeah. The reality is, like, Palestine is, for better or worse, it's the cutting edge issue for American politics today, and not just because of what's happening overseas and what we're allowing to happen. The fact that Trump is now sending billions of dollars more in weapons through emergency orders to the Israeli government, despite there being like a supposed ceasefire. Like the reality of what's happening here at home to American citizens, to legal permanent residents, for speaking out, speaking about their own political perspectives on the issue, on what they believe is just unacceptable for our country, our institutions to be investing in, and to see the type of repression reverberate from the president himself, from the federal government, to see ICE at an individual's doorsteps who is here legally and has not violated any laws, as confirmed by the White House themselves just a couple days ago. Like this is an issue that affects every single American, whether or not you believe in Palestinian rights and the humanity of Palestinians. And if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in American civil liberties, you have to recognize that this is an issue that affects all of us. And if you think that it's just about Palestine now, you're sorely mistaken. It's going to come for every single one of us. This is how authoritarianism works. This is how fascism starts. And unfortunately, that's where we are today.
I don't think it's a coincidence that they chose a permanent resident. This is a green card holder, married to an American with a child on the way. I mean, you know, if there was almost any other profile other than this guy was promoting a free Palestine, it would be a much more cut and dry case in terms of like where the Democratic Party lines up on this, where the media lines up on this. I mean, this was in my estimation, a deliberate move by the Trump administration to find the sort of wedge issue within the context of where Democrats writ large are, their leadership is, and the media is. And to build this project of being able to expand their ability to deport people, arrest people. I mean, I don't know if you could say he's arrested because he hasn't been even, as far as I know, charged with a crime. He's just being detained in some way. And I don't know if we have another example of something like this. I don't ever recall a similar example of this type of like vague detention for someone based upon having protests that are aligned in some way. I'm not even sure what that word means. I mean, what has been your perspective on the response by Democratic lawmakers? You know, I have a letter that was sent by, I think it was basically a dozen Congress people. And then I have another letter that was sent by AOC, Democratic lawmakers in New York State. But then you have other ones where Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer spend about 45 minutes of a letter basically saying, you know, defending Israel.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there is not a united front to protect, you know, the First Amendment, to protect the Constitution. I don't think it should be controversial. Democrat, Republican, anyone, if you're elected to higher office, it should be innate that you defend the Constitution and every individual's freedoms that are protected by that document. That should be a non-starter. And so I don't want to just blame Democrats here. I think Republicans' silence in the face of Trump's increasing authoritarian effort here is really concerning. Republicans need to be standing out as well. But the fact that Democrats as an opposition party can't even in a unified voice take a step and say, it does not matter, this is unacceptable, this is unconstitutional, this is un-American, that's concerning. And the fact that you have leaders of, you know, the Senate congressional delegation, you know, the House Majority Leader effectively engaging in anti-Palestinian rhetoric prior to just defending the First Amendment, that's really concerning. That does not bode well for where we are as Americans. And I hope things change. We do have a lot of leaders who have been very vocal and have not qualified, you know, their defense of the Constitution. I think Senator Chris Murphy was very, very direct. I think there's a lot of hope there. And I think that a lot of members of Congress can take cues from some of those leaders.
We're going to play that clip a little later in the program. So what is, before we pivot to what's happening at the DOE, the objective of a new policy, the organization that you have started with Josh Paul, what is, tactically, strategically, what are the objectives? Because it seems like, I mean, I know if it's a nonpartisan organization, but the Democratic Party seems to be the lowest of hanging fruit in terms of like change, but it really is. They're really boxed in, those leaders. It seems to me that some of these elected leaders are really boxed in. And at one point they've got to decide, we're not going to allow AIPAC and DMFI with basically Republican money to come and start to dictate where the direction of the party is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, frankly, the DNC has a responsibility to prevent that type of money from entering their primaries, because that is largely where the biggest impact has been in recent elections. And we've seen Democrats get primaried from the right, from a exclusively pro-Israel stance, and often minority Democrats, Democrats who are Black, who are getting primaried because of their position on human rights for Palestinians. And you're right. I think what we are doing with a new policy is recognizing that there are political barriers that just exist that should not be there. We need American politicians to work for the American people. And the reality is that our current policies of unconditional support to the Israeli government as it commits war crimes, as it withholds humanitarian aid, as it cuts off electricity, that's not good for people in the region, of course, but it's bad for American global standing. It's bad for American national security in the near and long term. And it's bad for Americans here at home who are watching billions of dollars go to another country's military instead of getting invested here at home as we're suffering because of rising costs due to inflation, because of corporate greed. There's no effort by Donald Trump and his administration to actually address the real problems that Americans are facing. And I think what we are trying to communicate is his willingness to allow AIPAC to write his talking points ultimately undermines American credibility and his credibility as a president who purportedly cares about the interests of everyday Americans. You don't get to say, oh, we are cutting off investments in other countries and all these like programs and aid except for Israel. Like that is really what he is doing. He is fast tracking billions of dollars of 2,000-pound bombs instead of just making sure that Americans here at home are feeling less pain because of the natural disasters that they've experienced over the last 6 months. That's not American. It's not good for anyone.
All right. I want to turn to the other non-American thing, one of the other that you have insight to that the president is doing that is not helpful, to say the least, to Americans. And that is, it was announced overnight, essentially, that the DOE was about to lose about half of its staff. This is coming after Republicans shut down the SAVE program. Will you just walk us through the different types of, or a couple of the loan forgiveness programs that were shut down and what this is going to mean? My understanding is the Trump administration is saying we don't want to be in the business of providing loans, of really doing anything regarding loans. So they're going to privatize the loan business. It's all going to be private loans. And also the administration of the existing loans, which, just like, as I say that, I know it's going to be an incredible crap show. But will you just walk us through what that means too for people? Because there's also for the public service loan forgiveness program, where they've deemed if you're doing the kind of public service we don't like, all of a sudden, all bets are off.
Donald Trump is weaponizing the entire federal government against vulnerable people, and that includes students, plain and simple. What he is doing to every aspect of the Department of Education shows that he's not actually interested in education at all. He's not interested in its core mission. The Department of Education was founded as a civil rights agency in the midst of schools and colleges not wanting to desegregate. This is like The purpose of the Department of Education primarily is to provide equal opportunity to all Americans to access a high quality education. That's what we have always done since its inception. And
let me just add, I just got to say this, the prototype of this came in Reconstruction, when in fact the Department of Education was to make sure that in fact freed slaves had the ability to become full citizens. I mean, education in this country has always been a function of making sure that there was equal education.
That's exactly right. Education is a human right. It's in the UN doctrine as well. But the reality is what Donald Trump is doing, he doesn't care about the core functions of the Department of Education. He wants to turn the Department of Education into a propaganda machine to be able to spew whatever political ideologies that he wants, and anything else is really antithetical to that. And so when it comes to increasing access to education at the K-12 level, higher education, any of those types of programs, that's really like not part of his vision for what it looks like. And if you can hand it off to the private sector, great, let's do that. This is an idea that Republicans have always touted. But if you look back to the Great Recession, we actually had a lot of private lenders in the education finance market. We had what was known as a guaranteed student loan program, where the government guaranteed private loans. So the idea that like this is somehow new, it's actually not. And it cost a lot more money before. We were able to make historic investments in the Pell Grant program because we switched from a privately guaranteed loan program to a federally financed, federally originated loan program. So this goes back decades already, but we also are in a situation where we are seeing drastically rising costs in education. We have been seeing this for years and years. And so going back to the Bush years, we started to see, and even the Reagan years, we started to see repayment programs that allowed people to pay their loans back based on what income that they made, so that you didn't have student loan payments that were so exorbitant that you couldn't afford to also pay your mortgage or to buy food for your kids or to pay for medicine if you got sick. And these income-based, income-driven repayment programs became more generous as the years went on because costs started rising. College became less and less affordable. We were making less actual investments in education, and schools were relying more on this debt finance model. And so long as the government allowed people to repay a portion of their income instead of here is a set balance, you have to pay this no matter what, it was a little bit more fungible. And the SAVE program was designed to make sure that people's student loans not only were affordable, but that your balance did not grow exorbitantly. And this is something that we had seen in recent years, is that borrowers would be making payments for years and years and years, but because of loan mismanagement and frankly, because of high interest rates, no one was ever seeing progress on the payments that they were making.
They weren't paying down their principal. They just kept paying interest over like 10, 20, 30 years.
So what we did at the Department of Education under the Biden administration was actually say, okay, if you have unpaid interest and you can't pay it all off, instead of it capitalizing into the principal, we're just going to pay it off for you, because you are obviously suffering some financial hardship, and it's not fair to you if you're doing everything you're supposed to do to have to take on that extra burden. So let's just make it a little bit easier for Americans that are like forced essentially just to be able to get a career to take on this massive level of debt. And Republicans said, no, we don't like that. We don't want you to actually help vulnerable borrowers. We don't want to make higher education more affordable. We want this to be as difficult as possible. And when it comes to public service loan forgiveness, this is one of the most important programs that was actually created by George W. Bush, by the way, passed with bipartisan support in Congress. It's been around since 2007. And the program is essentially designed for people who work in the public sector, people who work for the government at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, people who work for colleges and universities, people who work in nonprofit spaces where pay just does not match the private sector. This is teachers and nurses and social workers and firefighters who are eligible for this program. And the Trump administration said, you know what? We're going to change the rules. We're not going to allow everyone to be eligible if you work on specific issues that we don't like. So Palestinian rights types of organizations that work on immigration rights issues, people who work on gender equity issues and trans rights issues. We don't want those organizations to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And that's really dangerous, because that is a clear shot across the bow by the Trump administration to say, we get to decide who benefits financially from these federal programs that were created by Congress for anyone working in public service. And the way that the rules are designed, it is agnostic to whatever policies or politics that you have. If you are serving the public good, if you're helping vulnerable people, if you're getting underpaid because the type of organization that you work for is not profit making and profit seeking, there should be some sort of benefit to you as someone working for public's benefit. And that's what this program was supposed to do. So if you work for 10 years in that space, the rest of your loans, as long as you've been paying for 10 years, they get canceled, they get forgiven, they're wiped away, and you can work and you can survive without that debt looming over your head. And Donald Trump said, no, we want to weaponize this in a way that people will not want to fight for trans rights and will not want to fight for immigrant rights and Palestinian rights. And that's really, again, I hate to say it, it's un-American. A lot of the things that Donald Trump is doing right now are not good for Americans.
And I would add that the plans that they're floating now, your interest rate and your accessibility to loans will be a function of what kind of course load you take. So they are going to steer people into a specific chosen fields that will supposedly have, actuarially speaking, a higher return on investment, which of course then makes it tougher to get loans to become a teacher, to become a social worker, to do all the things that are already underpaid and undervalued in our society significantly, that are meant to further and better society as opposed to putting dollars in your pocket. And it's going to discourage people from going in there. We're going to end up having all sorts of problems down the road because you're making it that much harder for people to go in and do essentially broadly public service in many ways. Let me ask you this question. I've got a couple more. From your perspective, could the Biden administration have done something differently in terms of forgiving student debt during the years you were there?
Yes, I do think that we could have approached it in a much different way. We could have leaned into the fact that this was always going to be politicized, and we could have said, this is automatic. The secretary clearly has the authority. I think we made that legal determination fairly early on. We just wanted to know how to do it to make it most equitable and to make sure that, people who didn't really need relief didn't have to get it. But like, if you take out student loans, it's not because like, oh, I want to take out student loans. It's because you have to. And so I feel like on a baseline, it shouldn't matter if your income was a certain level. If you have it, we should provide relief, especially given the impact that COVID actually had on millions of Americans, their job security, their just entire lives were,
So you're saying that like early on, they should have just gone in, done it, get it over with.
Done it, automate it,
and
don't
then
create an application because the
apologize
application
afterwards.
Exactly. Ask for forgiveness, make it a lot harder. And then if Republicans sue and win, it's like, okay, we tried to do this. We made a promise. We kept our promise. Republicans stopped it. Like, you can say it in the way, we can still make that point right now. But the reality is that like, we could have been more aggressive. And what Donald Trump is doing is exactly, by the way, that, but he's doing more
the opposite.
Clearly illegal stuff in a politicized way. And he's saying, I'm king, I get to do whatever I want. It doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that all of it will hold up. But Democrats and the Biden administration was not willing to do what was necessary to make sure that vulnerable borrowers were getting relief that they needed and deserved and were eligible for.
Yeah, I mean, they're broadly, this is all a perfect illustration of the Republicans doing essentially, and then cleaning up the mess afterwards, as it were. In terms of the cuts to the DOE, do you know anything about special education? Will you just tell people what the DOE does in terms of special education, special needs, children who have learning challenges? Or atypical, neuroatypical, or have other atypical qualities that make it difficult to get an education. How does the DOE help with that?
Department of Education helps tremendously on so many of those fronts. There are numerous laws on the books created by Congress that essentially authorize the Department of Education not only to provide a substantial amount of resources to schools at the K-12 level and higher education to make sure that they are equally serving students with developmental and intellectual disabilities, particularly because public schools cannot turn away students in the way that private schools often do, but also to make sure that they're complying with those laws, to make sure that everyone is actually not only using those resources appropriately, but making sure that they are equally serving those students, that the students are getting what they need. There are a lot of different offices that collaborate on this work, that oversee these grants. A lot of them have been gutted. One of them works specifically on rehabilitative services and grants for people, both for individuals who are in the workforce and needing additional support for workforce training, and also for students who just need additional support in the educational process. There's also a lot of this work that overlaps with the Office for Civil Rights, which has been decimated just in the last 24 hours. There's so many important factors that the Department of Education does to ensure equal opportunities for all students. And I know Linda McMahon, before she was confirmed by the Senate, was asked about these programs very clearly and very specifically, IDEA being one, a lot of the rehabilitative services programs, civil rights. And she said, we are not going to do anything outside of the authority that Congress has given us. I would argue that these reductions in force make it impossible for the Department of Education to effectively do its job, and frankly undermine the integrity of the entire agency and undermine Congress's authorization of the agency.
When it seems that the things that the DOE did, the impact of them not doing these are going to be felt more significantly in red states than in blue states, right? Because the DOE had to come in and make sure that states that were hostile to public education, hostile to providing services for all their citizens, were actually providing these services. And so in states that were more inclined to do this in the first place, ostensibly if there is a frankly more progressive, liberal, left, whatever you want to call blue states, is that an accurate assessment?
Absolutely. I would say not only that, but this is just part of the Trump administration's entire whole of government weaponization to ensure that states, districts, schools across the country, no matter where they are, comply with the political directives of the Trump administration, whether it's on diversity and equity, whether it's about messaging, whether it's about cracking down on student speech. It doesn't matter what the issue is. They are weaponizing all of government to ensure that Americans feel some level of fealty to this president. And it's really dangerous. It's really, really dangerous for what it means for students who are vulnerable. It's dangerous for what it means for rural communities that already are under-resourced and need more support. It's dangerous for students in urban areas where the Department of Education has already been politically weaponized through their propaganda and their press releases. They're coming after Americans everywhere. And we all have an obligation to stand up and push back, to fight back. And what we're seeing on college campuses in particular, the fact that we've seen Columbia essentially adhere to every single requirement of the Trump administration to say, yes, sir, jump. Okay, we'll jump. You want us to shut down this speech? We'll do that. You want cops on our campus? We'll do that. They are preemptively agreeing to everything that Republicans, that Virginia Fox, Elise Stefanik, now Donald Trump.
That's exactly what academics say you don't do with an authoritarian leadership. All right, lastly, let me ask you one question, a question that probably won't be more relevant for, frankly, 3 or 4 years. But how does, you said you're a political appointee to the DOE, which means that you came in as part of the new administration. I don't think, my guess is that you have a personal relationship with Joe Biden, that you probably never met him. How does that happen? Like, you know, like I've tried to articulate in the past that you're not electing a president. You're electing people, I don't know, who are in, you know, way out in the co-centric circles from the presidency, but they know people who you're going to want to be in these offices, as opposed to who Donald Trump knows people who wants to be. Like, how did you get that job?
Great question. I worked in higher education policy, student loan policy for over a decade. I also worked in Democratic politics for a long time. And because of my experience, the relationships that I had, my expertise, the campaign, actually numerous campaigns during the primaries asked me to help support on policy items related to student loans and racial equity. I happily obliged. When Biden was the presumptive nominee, they were putting together what are called like policy committees. And I was asked to help support the drafting and organizing of a lot of those policy ideas to help, hand off something to the transition if Joe Biden was elected. That's what happened. And then eventually, because of, the work that I did, because of the work I had historically done, I got a call from the transition to interview and, took the call to service. I think for me, it was about serving the American people. It was about enacting an agenda that was focused on providing equal opportunity and improving educational opportunity for millions of Americans. It was something that I cared about really deeply. It wasn't a job that I, this is just like another job, check the box. Like I cared about it. I worked tirelessly to support a vision that was inclusive for all Americans. And I didn't take publicly resigning lightly because of an issue that I didn't get to work on directly. But as I said, Palestine is a cutting edge issue. And it was very clear the dissonance that students across America were already feeling in the early days and weeks of the president's unwillingness to pull back or use any sort of leverage with Netanyahu and the Israeli regime. And for me, it felt like an inevitability. If we weren't going to actually equally protect students on college campuses, if there was no way that I could make college campuses safer for students that looked like me, I had no business representing the administration.
Tariq Habash, former senior official at the Department of Education under Biden, founder and director of the organization New Policy. We will put a link to a New Policy. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, quick break. We'll come back with Dr. MarkAlain Dery, infectious disease specialist, to talk about measles and TB and all the fun stuff. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Want to welcome back to the program Dr. MarkAlain Dery, infectious disease specialist, founder of community radio station 102.3 WHIV-FM in Nolens, and creator of the NoiseFilter podcast. Doctor, we spoke to you a lot during COVID. And I have mixed feelings about talking to you again because of that. But going forward, we may have occasion to talk about these things, particularly based upon my one of my former coworkers in radio, Robert Kennedy, who is now in charge of our public health apparatus in this country. Broadly speaking, give us an overview of your concerns regarding Kennedy in that position.
Oof, that may take the rest of the show, really, quite frankly. I mean, let's just say the first meeting in which he appeared, in that cabinet meeting, the one where they were all around and Musk was there. And when the reporters asked the president about the measles outbreak, the president kind of deferred to Secretary Kennedy. And right off the bat, the first thing that he said is that there were 2 deaths. And let's just be clear, there's been 1 death from measles. How do you get that wrong? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you
off by one person. It's off by one person.
Or 50%, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah. So, so that was right off the bat. There was a lot of us in the medical world. There was just a big, long eye roll and a sigh. The second thing that I think that he did that's also very concerning as well, amongst the many things, but the things that if I pull it all together, was that he canceled the annual meetings of the ACIP, this is the American Committee, I think, for Immunization Practices. These are the folks that meet in March every year. These are very transparent. These are public scientists, not government scientists. And even if it was, we love our government scientists, but these are public scientists that meet every year to advise the government and pharmaceuticals as to what is going to go into the annual influenza vaccine that would happen in October. That meeting was canceled, and a second meeting was also canceled. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to get an influenza vaccine. We're probably going to lean on the WHO's recommendations to get that. But it's funny that we would leave the WHO, and then now we're still using WHO information. So it's things like that that are very concerning. Of course, muting the NIH and canceling a number of contracts and their ability to speak to the public, and the same thing for the CDC, and then pulling out of the WHO. Those are like the big things that I see being very problematic. And then I guess the last thing I would say is his, recently he penned an op-ed. I think it was maybe for Fox News. I can't remember who he op-ed for, in which, finally he said, yes, vaccines are good for the measles, what have you. This is the number one prevention. Of course it is. But then he goes off on these tangents of cod liver oil or vitamin A and these things that kind of take us back to the RFK that we knew he would possibly be. Now, vitamin A in countries that have chronic vitamin A deficiency in the setting of measles, yes, that's good. We don't have vitamin A deficiency in this country. So when you're talking about vitamin A, people may, kind of the same thing they did with hydroxychloroquine. They may use that as a substitute for what the best thing to do to prevent measles is actually the vaccine. And even in the setting of a epidemic like we're seeing right now, people who are unvaccinated can still go and get a measles vaccine and still be protected within a couple of days. So it's just a lot of confusing information. And I think we're going to see, I think I'm going to be on the show more often. I think I'm going to be making these visits more often because we are going to, one of the things, like you said in the intro, was the NoiseFilter podcast, which we did during COVID, during the pandemic. We're having to resume that podcast, that radio program, because the CDC and the NIH have been muted, and there needs to be voices that are out there that can kind of help explain what's going on, at least from the infectious diseases perspective.
So you're a practicing doctor, but you also are involved in public health in the context of is it Access Health Louisiana?
Access Health Louisiana,
which is, if I remember, the biggest Medicaid provider in Louisiana.
Louisiana, yeah, go ahead.
Will you just, so the people understand this, will you describe the difference between practicing medicine, not the actual application of it, but the sort of the conceptual difference between being a medical practitioner and public health? Like these are not the same things per se, right? And will you explain that conceptual difference? Because that's important, I think, when we talk about Kennedy saying, at Fox News, writing down, and who reads anymore, get a measles vaccine, and then sort of going out and giving interviews saying, well, cod liver oil, which has a lot of vitamin A and, whatever it is, that in addition to the fact that one is preventative care and one is sort of trying to mitigate the impact of getting a disease. But will you talk about just sort of like broad strokes, that difference between practicing medicine and public health as a concept?
Yeah, I mean, I could say it in one sentence. When you're practicing medicine, like I'm at work today, I'm at the hospital. This is where, the last couple of years, this is where my practice has kind of evolved into. I am seeing one patient, one person at a time. When I'm practicing public health, I am reaching tens, 20s, hundreds, thousands of people. And when I was doing radio, literally tens of thousands of people all at the same time. So as public health practitioners, we are quite literally impacting the public's health. Versus as a physician, as soon as I'm done here and I continue with my rounds, I'm seeing one patient at a time. And the work that I'm doing is impacting that one person at a time.
But conceptually speaking, when you're talking about public health, you're weighing risks in a slightly different way, right? Are 100%. You not? Okay, we just walk us through that because there is no medication that is 100% safe. I mean, there's nothing you can say that about. And as a individual practitioner, you make an assessment on an individual basis that may deviate from broad strokes what is good for public health policy. But public health policy the health is not of the individuals in society, but rather society as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, let me give you an example of what's happening here in the state. In fact, I had an op-ed that just that ran yesterday in our local paper here, The Advocate, and the op-ed was in response to the health commissioner, the state health commissioner, and the state health commissioner. And in fact, it was timed right after RFK was confirmed. Like minutes after they were confirmed, a planned letter was sent to the Louisiana Department of Public Health in which the state commissioner was telling the Louisiana Department of Public Health to stop all mass vaccination programs and to stop promotion of all seasonal vaccines. So the idea, again, is to stop, to stop the communication. And in my letter to the editor that was published yesterday, I talked about the example, and I think I came on here and I talked about it a bit a couple years ago when we were seeing Mpox. And we had a we had an Mpox outbreak here in New Orleans that happened in the summer of 2022. It was in August of 2022. That's important because at the end of August, early September, we have what's referred to here locally, colloquially as Gay Mardi Gras, which is called Decadence Weekend. And in Decadence, this is where you were going to see lots of LGBT community coming together. And at the time, Mpox, and it still mostly is mostly transmitted, mostly not exclusively, but mostly transmitted amongst men who have sex with men in a sexual contact. And so we were incredibly concerned that we would see a large outbreak of Mpox as a result of Decadence Weekend happening here in New Orleans. And so what happened was that the state health department, the New Orleans Health Department, and the CDC came together and did mass vaccination programs in which they vaccinated a large portion of the LGBT community here in New Orleans. I was actually exposed. I actually was part of that vaccination. I got vaccinated myself because of an exposure as a result of seeing a patient, and I was not in PPE. I was not expecting to see the Mpox. But the point that I'm making, a larger point that I'm making goes back to what you're asking, Sam, which is without that ability to have done that, we would have definitively seen a larger outbreak of Mpox that would have happened here in New Orleans in that summer of 2022 because of that getting together of people's, like I said, in decadence. So what we do in public health, like you said, there's no one fixes all. It has to be slightly tailored depending on the communities that you're working with or what have you. And what we saw with these mass vaccination programs that we're not doing in New Orleans or in Louisiana anymore. So I don't know what would happen if there was a measles. We're on the other side of Texas. So what happens? And my big concern was that we just got through Mardi Gras. In fact, this time last week, we were just recovering from Mardi Gras because it was last Tuesday. And I was advising people who were not vaccinated for measles to not come to Mardi Gras and to not be at parades for fear that we would see outbreaks of measles. And we're still kind of waiting. Right now, we're at the end of the window. So, hopefully we got out of it unscathed. But the larger point is that public health is incredibly important. We're seeing it being muted all over the country, including here in the state of Louisiana. And without the public health practitioners being able to do what they do, I really, really foresee that we're going to see problems moving down the line. And one more thing real quickly. In Houston, there's going to be a very large rodeo in the next couple days, and it lasts for, I think it's a week, and it brings in lots of people from Texas. And the concern is what happens now when you have people from the western part of Texas that are going to come to this rodeo who may have asymptomatic measles, or they may have an early, and they don't realize that they are, they're still asymptomatic, that could potentially also cause an outbreak to happen. And as public health practitioners, these are the things that we're constantly looking for, kind of trying to see where these things are so that we can get in there and mitigate it, prevent these things from happening.
All right, let's talk about what the things that keep you awake are. I remember one of our early conversations about COVID-19, and I said, what is your biggest concern? And I think you said COVID-22, 2022. Which ended up being, I think we called it Omicron at the time, or a different variation, which was highly problematic because we had developed a vaccination and a vaccine for the wild type of COVID-19, and then it mutated several times, and it was very hard to get in front of that. I want to ask you about long COVID, but let's first, what are the things that are on your radar right now as somebody who works in public health?
So I think the two things,
obviously measles,
measles, yes, but just far, far, far and away is bird flu. Far, far, far and away is bird flu. And then the second thing is this hantavirus that surfaced in New Mexico. And let's start with that because that'll be quick to get through. The reason why that worries me is, let me take a step back.
Hantavirus is the one where you are in a fairly enclosed space that may have a lot of rodent feces.
Yeah,
is that right?
I'll explain Hanta, because I actually diagnosed 2 cases of hantavirus when I was on the Navajo reservation when I was doing my public health payback for medical school. So let me just quickly remind everybody that in 2014, 2015, I went to West Africa. I responded to the Ebola outbreak with the WHO, World Health Organization, hired me to go and work as basically a clinical epidemiologist on the ground in Freetown, Sierra Leone. The reason why I mention that is that prior to that outbreak, it was not known that Ebola was in West Africa. It was only, we thought it was confined to East Africa and Central Africa. But when you look at the reservoirs, the fruit bats that carry Ebola, their entire flight path starts kind of in southern Africa. It goes up around East and Central Africa, and it ends in West Africa. So there's no reason to believe that it was never in West Africa until we started seeing deaths. Now, the reason why we never knew it was in West Africa is because when people die in West Africa, a large number of those countries, especially in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, don't have electricity. So people are buried. The traditions are people are buried very, very rapidly. And they didn't have the PCR technology to diagnose Ebola. But we now know that, yes, a major outbreak had happened. We just had never really seen it or thought about it. So now let's take that and think about it from a Hunta perspective now in New Mexico. So what is hantavirus? It's another one of these so-called viral hemorrhagic fevers. This virus affects the heart and the lungs. We first were aware of it on the Navajo reservation in 1992. That was the first time we really had seen hantavirus. I don't know if you remember, I remember I was in public health school. So for me, it was very exciting to kind of see this whole thing unfold and how it was diagnosed. The first two cases were a couple who were together. They were very athletic. They were marathon runners, and they died very, very quickly. And that brought the CDC out. And that virus ended up being called sin nombre, which means without a name, because they initially wanted to call it the Four Corners virus, because that's on the Navajo. The Navajo people were like, there's no way you're doing that. They called it sin nombre. So what is the concern here? So when I was on the reservation in 2005, in January of 2005, in fact, this has a climate change element to it, because usually you see it in spring or the summer. And what we saw in January, early January, I diagnosed a case in a 15-year-old young lady. It still gives me and my colleague, and we talk about her regularly, chills to even think about it. She was very, very healthy. She came to us in distress, and unfortunately, she passed away. And that was on the way to the pediatric hospital in Phoenix. We were in Page, Arizona at the time, the Navajo Nation. And so there was an outbreak that happened. There was 6 cases. So I diagnosed the first case, and I diagnosed the last case. And this is a very rapidly progressing virus. So what happened? So Gene Hackman's wife died, right? And of course, Gene Hackman died, right? So as a result of their kind of unusual deaths, they did very intensive autopsies to determine what it was that they died from. And they likely found the virus in her lungs. And so what is of concern for me is that it could be that we're seeing more hantavirus. I don't know, but just using that same Ebola, kind of what we learned from the Ebola perspective, that what we're possibly seeing with hantavirus is that maybe there are more cases of hantavirus that never have been diagnosed. It could be that an elderly person goes to the ER, they may have a bilateral pneumonia on both sides, and then it just consumes them rapidly because we don't really do autopsies anymore. And then nobody thinks about hantavirus because usually you see it in the setting of a pandemic. And interestingly enough, like you said, the reason why we see it on the Navajo Nation is that the traditional Navajo still live in things that are called hogans. And hogans are kind of the traditional Navajo living dwellings, if you will. No electricity, no really running water. Oftentimes the ground is the dirt ground of the desert. And these deer rodents that carry this virus, when you and I have a flight or fight response, like our pupils dilate, our GI tract shuts down, and we run, right? But these rodents, their flight or flight response is immediately to evacuate their bowels and to empty their bladder. And the virus is carried through the stool and the urine. So later when it dries and when people are going through and sweeping or what have you, this aerosolizes the virus. And this is how
can it be person to
no person-to-person transmission.
No person-to-person transmission.
No person-to-person.
Okay.
So that keeps me up. That really scared me. But the real big one is bird flu. And I'll tell you another story that's happened fairly recently here in Louisiana. So there's only been 3 hospitalizations of bird. Let's take a huge step back. So we've seen bird flu go through, and I think one of the last shows I may have started talking to you about bird flu because, again, we're doing this and I'm like, bird flu may be a thing that's coming. What we saw was a lot of the chickens were culled during COVID. And in fact, I think I remember talking about it here. And that was why in 2022, we saw a rapid increase in the price of eggs. It was because there were a lot of chickens that were culled. As a result of the culling, chicken prices or egg prices went up like we're seeing right now. So those chickens were killed. But then of course it's still circulating in the wild. So then the birds were able to transmit to large mammals. So we started seeing in large mammals, ultimately to bovine. And I just checked this morning, I think there's almost 800 different herds of dairy farms around the country that are now are infected with this bird flu. And so right now it's mostly limited to bird flu. And I read a really interesting study in which there was a bunch of, the CDC went to a veterinarian conference and people just voluntarily gave blood. And they found that 3 out of the, I think 15 or 20 people that that gave blood had antibodies for bird flu. So we are seeing some asymptomatic transmission to humans. So these veterinarians didn't know that they had bird flu, but they had been interacting with these cows.
So if I understand, the danger here is that either through, let's say, non-pasteurized milk, where the bird flu is not been killed, or through people working with poultry in some fashion, or conceivably in the wild, but less likely because you're not in direct, you rarely are in direct contact with wild birds as, just an average person, but that the bird flu transmits to someone who has an existing human flu, and that this creates a mutation, and that's like sort of the real concern. Like bird flu in and of itself is not human to human transferable and is not hugely lethal. I guess both in terms of like an R value, which is how it transmits, but also in terms of the severity of it. But that if it mutates with an existing flu, then it could be off to the races.
Right. So let me kind of let's kind of unpack that. So yes, we're not interacting with birds that have bird flu unless they're dead. So that's the concern. So it's people who are interacting with dead birds. So who are that? They're hunters. So if you're hunting and you find, put on PPE before you, and so, but the case that I'm driving to is the case that happened in Louisiana. So we don't know the details. The CDC has not released it. The state of Louisiana has not released any details about the person who got it. All we know is in southwestern Louisiana. So this was a person who interacted with a dead bird in his or her backyard, in their backyard, and got the flu, bird flu, was very, very, very sick, was in the intensive care unit, and then ultimately died. Now, interestingly enough, the CDC was at the bedside, and they were drawing samples, and while this person was still alive, and what they were doing is they were culturing the virus. They were able to culture the virus, and they were able to understand its genetics. And what they saw was that the virus was mutating while it was in the host, and it was mutating. The genes were lining up. They were arranging themselves in a way that it was making it more likely for human-to-human transfer. Now, it didn't happen, but what they documented was that the genes were lining up and positioning themselves in a way that there could be human-to-human transfer. But the scenario you're talking about is truly the thing that keeps me up at night. And that is these workers that work with the cows. They can't wear PPE because they have these, first of all, they have these huge fans that are going on. There's feathers. There's all
This
of
is
this
before pasteurization, right?
Yes, before pasteurization, while they're working with the cow. So if one of these folks are subject to the bird flu, and they happen to be co-infected with a human flu, the idea is if you have two of these different flus in one cell inside your nares, your nostrils, inside there, if two influenza viruses are next to one another, they're going to mate. They're going to have viral sex. And the thing that we're concerned about is what happens if the bird flu part gets the human-to-human transferred genetic portion. That's called recombination. That sex that they have is called recombination. So those genes recombine so that you end up with one flu that's bird flu in nature, but has the element of human-to-human transfer. That's the concern, and that's the thing that keeps me up at night. Some good news on that end is first let me also say that the bird flu as it stands now, there's been about 800 cases around the world. We've been following this for several decades now. It has a 50% mortality rate. Okay, and it's mostly healthcare workers who are dying because they're the ones that are interacting directly with the patients. But if that, and we've talked about this a number of times here on the show, if the bird flu does end up popping off, if it ends up evolving into an epidemic, there's no way it's going to have a 50% mortality rate, because you can't be a virus that's highly transmittable and also highly have a high mortality rate. That's just in nature. It just doesn't exist.
Right. You burn out your kindling too quickly, essentially.
Right. So you're going to be one or you're going to be the other, right? So you either have high mortality rate like Ebola or hantavirus, but you have low transmission rates, or the flip side, you have high infectious, rate like measles, but you don't kill your host, right? You want to be able to transfer. I think bird flu is going to be a little bit, I think it'll still have some mortality rate. It's definitely not going to be COVID or flu, but I'm completely speculating at this point. But the good news is right now, we could vaccinate 20% of the country, like right now. We could vaccinate 20% of the country, and prior to the current administration, I could say that they were preparing for mRNA vaccines. And this is another thing that keeps me up at night, is I don't know what happened. With the adversity to vaccines that the current administration has, I don't know. And then also, what happens if we want to leave the country and we are not, it could be that other countries now are going to start looking at us, frankly,
potential carriers.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, and then the last thing I'll say about this too, Sam, is that the rest of the world is looking at us, and they're writing articles about, hey, America, chop chop. Like, we see what's happening. The nice thing about public health, it's not hard. You can predict these things. Mpox is here a month ahead of decadence. We know if we vaccinate now, we're not going to see an outbreak come decadence. These are not difficult things. And what we are seeing right now, and our lack of action, is very problematic, because we are inching closer and closer to a potential bird flu pandemic. I'm concerned about that.
Well, I hope we don't have to talk about that again, but I fear that we might. Dr. MarkAlain Dery, we'll put a link to your relaunch of NoiseFilter as a way. People, we don't have the same public health apparatus that we did, frankly, 3 months ago. And so projects like yours, hugely important. Thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we got to take a break, head into the fun half. Sorry. Just a reminder, it is your... I have a couple of corrections to make. One is that it's concentric. Circles, for a long time, I said concentric. Then I said concentric. But the real term is concentric circles. Now, I would say there's a very good chance I will not get that right next time I've done it, because I've been saying concentric circles probably for 40 years.
Yeah.
So
I literally sort of internalized it as a normal word, and of course it's not.
I mean, it's not. Also, I have been informed that to say Nolans in the way that I did is to invite being mugged in New Orleans.
Yeah, they don't like that.
So those are the two things that I stand corrected. We will issue the correction. We will comb the transcriptions and correct that. That's the AI bot that I want. One that immediately changes my pronunciation errors in real time.
They already have it where it can take out the ums.
In real time?
Not yet. Maybe that's the
next
one.
That's the one I want to see. Thank you for reminding me that's a problem. Folks, your support makes this possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you can IM us for the fun half. And also, I don't know, I was trying to work in some joke. Just go onto Twitter and search Sam Seder Jew. It's really amazing.
You get Sam's POV for the last few days.
It's really, really amazing. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use your coupon code majority, get 10% off. ESVN on hiatus, and Matt, Left Reckoning.
Left Reckoning last night, we had Carl Bayer on talking about the Mahmoud Khalil stuff and Ukraine, Russia, and then Terrence Ray of the Trillbillies on talking about Red and Blue America, and well, it's not maybe the most helpful. He goes into like the history of like Thomas Frank and different sort of ways of looking at it. So a really interesting piece in The Nation by Terrence. So check that out. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black black, and the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Fun Half, Majority Report, Emma Vigeland, off today. Let me just get this straight from what we've heard from people, whether it's Gavin Newsom, whether it's establishment Democrats, whether it's big progressive news outlets, whether it's other sort of like, I don't know, Democratic appeasers who feel that the push for trans rights in this country went overshot. And the way to correct this is to meet in the middle. I mean, this is exactly what I was told about abortion 20 years ago. We need to compromise. And they'll meet us in the middle on this. And now, aside from the fact that trans rights as an electoral issue was probably around number 21 on what motivated people's voting. And I understand that with the expenditure of $1 billion over the course of several years, you can move political opinion one way or another, whether they're terribly invested in it or not. But when you spend that kind of money, you're reaching, and incidentally, there's no pushback. You're going to form the opinions of otherwise uninformed people because it's just and there's no investment in this. There's certainly a lot of investment in it in the core base of the Republican Party, without a doubt. But in terms of like the casual person, a citizen in this country, they don't care about the half a dozen student athletes who are trans amongst the 500,000 that exist. They don't care about the one trans athlete in their state playing sports. And the whole sort of like the whole political project to say we should pull back and just compromise. Well, the president signed an edict saying that there would be no funding for schools that have any trans athletes in the country. The the NCAA has said they will not allow trans athletes to play in their sports, right? End of story. Finally, we've made compromise. Today is March 12th. And according to the handbasket.co, the Republicans today are observing D-Trans Awareness Day. Both the Department of Education and apparently Dan Crenshaw's office are holding separate events to celebrate de-transitioning trans people. What happened? I thought if we just met halfway, if we only preserved the sanctity of high school and elementary school and middle school and college sports, If we were only to preserve the sanctity of that, then these good faith attacks on the existence of trans people will go away. The day before D-Trans Day, here is Representative Keith Self in a House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee hearing. You know, Foreign Affairs. This is in Congress.
I now recognize the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Pause it. He's referring to Sarah McBride. She is the Democrat congressperson from Delaware at large. First trans woman elected to Congress. Go back to the beginning.
I now recognize the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Keating, also wonderful.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
could you repeat your introduction again, please?
Yes, we have set the standard on the floor of the House, and I'm simply.
What is that standard, Mr. Chairman? Would you repeat what you just said when you introduced a duly elected representative from the United States of America? Please.
I will. The representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Mr. Chairman, you are out of order. Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? I've come to know you a little bit, but this is not decent.
We will continue this.
You will not continue it with me unless you introduce a duly elected representative the right way.
This hearing is adjourned.
What happened? They have their trans athletes out of sports. Why aren't they satisfied? Is this shocking? Is this shocking to anybody? The project from day one was about this. Day one. It's detransition day. Honestly. People who are advocating for some type of compromise and be reasonable and don't ask for pursuit of rights. Read a frickin' book. Or just go back into internet archives. It's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. Unbelievable. Really unbelievable. Good for Bill Keating. That dude from Massachusetts? Basically telling Keith Self to go F himself. That's...
And too cowardly to... Oh, it's what we agreed in the standards earlier.
Right.
How old is that guy? He's like 70. Your whole life leading to that.
And here's the thing: the establishment Democratic retreat on this, wherever you see the retreat on this, all it does is give them space to expand their attacks on trans people. If you don't understand that, you don't understand anything about politics. And there's also very little ability now to push back on this. Because you've trained all your minions not to do it. Because it's somewhat unpopular to people who have very little investment in the issue and don't care. People are wondering, why can't we get rid of, why can't we have gun control? 75, 80% of the population is for some type of reasonable gun control. The point is people don't vote on it. and only the diehards, only the homosexuals line up on it. And for too many years, there was just too much acquiescence. Why was it that abortion was never considered an urgent issue for the Democrats to ensconce in federal law? Why didn't they want to expand, or I should say, expend the political capital on it? It's because there was an element of the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton was leading this charge. That we need to sort of meet them in the middle. And what that does is it essentially undercuts the push and the urgency. And it obscures what's actually going on. And you're communicating to your own voters, this isn't that important. And then it ends up being a cudgel used against you. The idea that the existence of trans people in 2025 should be an electoral weapon used by the Republican Party, understand, is a function of the Democrats allowing it to happen. Or I shouldn't say allowing it, but providing for it out of sheer incompetence and cowardice. It is a failure of understanding political dynamics.
The border stuff is the same story.
100%. Maybe if we meet them halfway. No, you need to articulate a position. I would suggest one that you supposedly, morally, perceive as just and moral. But just as a political matter, you don't need to feel that way to understand how this dynamic works. The idea that, they really care about women's sports and high school girls' sports. They just cut $1 billion to feed children in school. They don't give a shit about that. They don't care about the kids. Honestly. It just doesn't exist. I mean, it just doesn't, it makes no sense. And all you do is empower these people. And if you don't understand that, you're an idiot. And if you do understand it and you're still doing it, then you're a scumbag.
Shouldn't be in politics or commentary.
Gavin Newsom can now go F himself. Honestly, I don't know. Was it 3 or 4 different opportunities? Do you want to talk to somebody in Gavin Newsom's office? This is years ago. I'm like, no, I don't think I do. I'm going to wait.
Gavin Newsom's still governor, right?
Yeah.
Paul George for the Philadelphia 76ers had the decency to shut his podcast down when he started failing. I guess it's time to talk to Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk for Gavin Newsom.
That's so gross. Yeah, do you know how anti-Semitic? We played that Charlie Kirk stuff, where he said that Jews were funding anti-American stuff. Is Gavin Newsom going to have to account for that? You got somebody who's just disappeared because they were supposedly anti-Semitic. 3 posts from the Daily Wire guys, and my entire Twitter feed is just reminding me that I'm a Jew. All right, let's try and do something that's a little more fun. Here is, which one of these Tesla things should we play? Should we play 7 or 8 first? Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I don't know if people know that these guys work together at all. But Elon Musk, when he's not trying to starve children, either in this country or frankly other countries, or when he's not trying to crash people's college debt, make it impossible to pay back their loans, when he's not trying to keep the EPA from protecting the health of people who live in low-income neighborhoods, when he's not trying to stop investment in other green technologies, when he is not trying to scrape all of Americans' data from the Treasury Department, when he's not trying to crash the Social Security system, Medicaid system, when he's not trying to steal data of children from HHS, he's also overseeing a car company that apparently is beginning to sink like a rock. I don't read the car press that often, but my understanding is that the product line is now sort of like getting a little long in the tooth. People are sick of all the recalls, and he has completely ruined the brand of Tesla. So what does he do? Well, does he call his friend or does he call his business partner? Maybe they're both the same thing. Hey, any chance I could get you to promote Tesla on the White House lawn? Sure.
So all these cars won incredible awards. So they're great cars and they're American made. And I think, try it. You'll like it.
And I was saying, beyond the cars, they're great. But we have to celebrate somebody that has the courage to do this. He could have said, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to get involved. Let the country go to hell. He didn't want to do that. And remember, he's going to find, and we're up to almost $500 billion worth of waste and fraud. And if it's $500 billion, we're giving $2 billion here, $2 billion, and not millions. It was a bet. If it was $1 million or $2 million, that's a lot of money. But we're talking about billions of dollars being given.
Pause it for a second. That's interesting. Incidentally, there is absolutely nothing backing up the claim that they've cut $500 billion in waste. It's just absolutely 100% not. But he's right. $1 million is a lot of money. Donald Trump ended up buying one of these cars. You want to see what he got for a rebate on this? It's pretty, they get a great rebate program for this one. There it is. $100 million directly into the Trump political operation. Wow, what a coincidence. You scratch my back, I scratch your back.
Tesla supposedly doesn't pay for advertising. So
there you go. It's all word of mouth. All we got to do is find the right influencer.
This image, the shabbiness of this, to have cars lined up like it's a car dealership right in front of the...
Now listen, we have presidents who promote American-made vehicles all the time. I think I remember Biden getting into maybe a Ford Mustang and driving away. Right. But how naked it is, had the CEO of Ford contributed $300 million to getting Biden elected, I think it would raise a few eyebrows. And then on the day that he rolls out in that Thunderbird or whatever it was, then he gets another $100 million into his pack. That just seems a little suspicious, doesn't it? Am I the only person who notices something weird there?
Friends can't do that sort of stuff with each other these days?
It's just a coincidence. It's a coincidence. I mean, they are politically aligned, certainly. But that's just, I mean, this is what this presidency is. This is what this regime is. And play the clip of the Republican lawmakers who are outraged at this notion that Donald Trump would be just open and out and open, taking essentially a bribe. Play that clip. Oh, it doesn't exist. Shocking. Shocking. Meanwhile, speaking of scandals involving Tesla and Elon Musk, we just told you about the Elon Musk advertisement that the Trump administration did, which, again, American-made product. Why wouldn't you? With the slight sort of twist that there has never been a single bigger contributor to a single campaign in the history of America that was larger than Elon Musk's contribution to Donald Trump's campaign in the 2024 election. And now, on that same day or the day after that he does the commercial, Musk donates another $100 million to Donald Trump's PAC. Tesla seems to have a little sort of quirky thing going on in Canada. You've heard the stories that Tesla in Europe may be in trouble because their entire business model has been selling cars and then basically providing the carbon offsets as its real way of making money by selling those to other corporations. Basically, their profit model is to create a net neutral. With every sale, they will net neutralize carbon footprint. So it's sort of like, I mean, imagine when you went to go buy an electric car, you were like, oh, this is great. I'm not going to be burning fossil fuels. But in fact, actually what you are is allowing the burning of fossil fuels to exist. I think it would sort of undercut your whole, like I can tell you that my uncle, years ago was a Chrysler dealership. And so I know this. Chrysler at one point bought this company called GEM. This was like 30 years ago. And GEM makes those like little sort of flatbeds that you see at football games that will drive off players that have been injured. And those are electric. And the reason why Chrysler bought GEM was because they wanted to lower their entire fleet's average mileage per gallon of gas, or I should say raise it to fit with CAFE standards that were issued. This must have been maybe during the Clinton administration. And so that's basically what the scam that the Tesla is. But
it's like one of those shoe companies that if you buy them, they give a pair of shoes to a needy person in another part of the world, but instead they're just giving a carbon offset to like Exxon or something. Like
exactly. But it turns out there may be a different scam that Tesla was involved in. Crystal Ball has been following it. Take this just from right before she brings in the Canadian people. So, right around here. She has been following this and runs a Canadian report, and it's sort of fascinating. These things, in one particular weekend, flew off the shelves, as it were.
More significant, could also be a potential indicator of just how desperate the floundering company has become as pressures from a toxic leader, a stale product line, and increased competition mount. Tesla is now being investigated for possible government fraud, not of our government, but of Canada. An irony, to say the least, at a moment when Elon is posturing like the ultimate warrior against government waste, fraud, and abuse. Lest you think this is some sort of politically motivated witch hunt because of Elon's position in an administration currently waging economic war on Canada, take a listen to the facts from this local Canadian news report.
A suspicious spike in Tesla sales has experts in the industry scratching their heads. It started with a deadline in January for Ottawa's rebate program on electric vehicles that allegedly prompted a mad rush to buy EVs. CTV's Adrian Gabriel has been crunching the numbers. And Adrian, do they add up?
Sandy, a spike in purchases was to be expected, though the reported sale of 8,600 Teslas equaling $43 million in rebates at 4 Canadian Tesla locations has sparked plenty of questions.
Pause it. Now, I can tell you something right now that, like I said, my uncle was a car dealer back in the day. 8,600 cars, 4 dealers. That's pretty good numbers. That is really, really, really good numbers. on an annual basis, if you have 4 car dealerships that are moving 2,000, 2,100, 2,150 a year, that is a lot of cars. Remember, there's only 365 days in the year. You're moving 3 cars a day off that lot every single day.
Maybe they got a really good Glengarry Glen Ross style pep talk those days.
Somebody's really good at sales there. Somebody's really good at sales. But it turns out those are not annual numbers. Go ahead.
Canadian Tesla locations has sparked plenty of questions. In the west end of Toronto, this one Tesla location alone reported selling more than 1,200 vehicles on January 11th, totaling more than $4 million in rebates.
Wow, wait a second. These guys are good car salesmen.
Always be closing.
1,200 on January 11th. That's pretty good. Of course, now, to be fair, January 11th could be, I'm not Canadian, but it could be National Everybody Buy a Car Day at this dealership. And January 11th, to be fair, is a Saturday. So people, are off work. And, 1,200 coming in that day and all buying cars. If you get your yield right, everybody's got their thing. Like, we got to get it down. We can't have... there's not a day when 1,200 people go into that dealership and you're selling every single one of them a car. That is pretty impressive. Continue.
Tesla location alone reported selling more than 1,200 vehicles on January 11th, totaling more than $4 million in rebates. So we paid them a visit to try and get some clarity on the staggering number of sales. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. My name's Adrian Gobriel. I'm a journalist with CTV News.
Oh, pause it. The salesman's going to brag about this, right? Because this is like, I hope this Tesla is just a way station. After it comes out the way this guy sells, somebody's going to scoop him up. This is talent. All right, so back up a little bit. I want to hear this. It's going to be great. The guy's going to be like, watch him sell himself too, I bet.
January 11th, totaling more than $4 million in rebates. So we paid them a visit to try and get some clarity on the staggering number of sales. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. My name's Adrian Gobriel. I'm a journalist with CTV News.
Okay.
There was a large increase in the number of sales processed through the EV rebate program. Just trying to get an understanding of perhaps what maybe some of the reasons were behind that. Did that take place, or is that a backlog of paperwork going through? You can't share any comments. Is there any manager you think that might be able to?
I am the manager.
Our multiple emails to Tesla's headquarters have been met with silence.
Weird.
It defies logic.
Listen to this guy. This is good.
That these corporate stores of Tesla and Tesla shareholders and Elon Musk would be able to sell 8,600 vehicles in a single weekend. There's something highly unusual about this.
So to recap, Canada has been running an EV rebate program, which has been quite popular and quite successful. The way the program works is that when a customer purchases an EV, the cost of the rebate is originally fronted by the dealership. Then the dealer receives reimbursement from the government. Now, in early January, the government announced the fund was running low on money and might be suspended sometime in the next few weeks. And that is when 4 Tesla dealerships pulled off the biggest miracle since fish and loaves, somehow selling 8,600 cars in just 3 days.
Now,
see how few they've been selling before then.
Yes. Now, there's a suggestion that maybe there was a backlog of documents. But again, 8,600 cars sold by 4 different outlets. And just presumably that backlog is just for the year. Really, there's 2 jobs when you have a car dealership. One is sell cars. The other is to keep paperwork. That's basically it. They didn't file their rebate. Oh, we don't need those rebates. Hey, guys, listen, gather round. We all know there's a limited amount of funds out there. So don't you take your time when you're writing out for your rebates. Maybe wait 6-7 months.
Yeah, we don't need that money.
We don't need that. Hey, don't worry. Your bonuses are not tied to this. We're going to front you the money and hope that we get it. So don't worry. Don't fill out your paperwork quick. Now, here's the other part, too. There were actual car dealerships that actually sold EVs. And because of this huge spike, the 8,600 cars sold in a day, the EV rebate fund ran out. And so people who had, the dealerships that had already fronted, anticipating like, oh, there's this amount left. It's not like somebody's going to pretend like they sold 8,600 in a weekend, so the money will be there. It screwed a bunch of car dealers out of this money. And they're investigating it. I wonder what's going to happen there.
Well, at least Tesla Quebec City, Tesla 80, I don't know what that is, Tesla Vancouver, and Tesla Lawrence Avenue are taken care of.
And the good news is those guys are going to have a great career in sales.
Coffee is for closers. Closing 1,200 deals.
There you go. All right. Should we take, I'm going to take a couple of calls, but we don't have much time. I'm sorry. We got to work on this. Muddy Mo, a potential Tesla rebate fraud in Canada is why I want people to be looking at the numbers and asking questions and not AI. Kowalski from Nebraska, a buddy of mine used to work at a fairly large Ford dealership. It is possible to sell a couple hundred cars at one go, like the Union Pacific or possibly like the State Patrol. But you would never buy this many Teslas unless somebody is starting the all-electric Winnipeg taxi service, which I doubt was the case. I would be absolutely surprised if there is 8,600 taxis in Winnipeg. Ryan,
if you want an electric vehicle in Winnipeg at this point, I don't want a Tesla. Get frozen into it.
NYC transit worker. Sam, is there any way you can do an impression of Chuck Schumer with glasses on the bottom of your nose? The Baileys, they don't want to see us fighting. We will win. We will win.
Just stop. I'm going to cut the feed.
We will win. Incidentally, we received one email so far from a Bailey in New York State. If your last name is Bailey and you live in New York State, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put in the subject line, I'm a Bailey, and you will be part of our ongoing series that we're going to launch soon, where we interview a Bailey and get their opinion on what Chuck Schumer's doing. So we can really, we can take this out of the realm of hypothetical and fictional and get to the meat of the matter. Let's make this concrete.
Get to who really matters, the Baileys.
Exactly. Speaking of Elon Musk, one more moment here. I'll open up the phone lines. We're going to have time for one phone call. That's my guess. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. Let's do this Social Security thing. On my Jubilee debate, as I want to do in really any circumstance, I wanted to talk about Social Security. And part of that reason why I want to do that is because so many people, broadly speaking, not just Republicans like Trump supporters like these guys, have complete misunderstanding about Social Security. This was recorded back in January when there was no talk of cutting Social Security. Donald Trump said, I'm never going to touch Social Security. I'm never going to touch Social Security. Here is Elon Musk. On Friday, was this Friday? No, yesterday, sorry, Monday. Monday is not yesterday. 2 days ago, Monday, on Larry Kudlow's program, talking about how all of a sudden there's this huge fraud and waste in Social Security that nobody seems to have known about?
Go another year?
Yeah, I think so.
Final report, middle of next year?
Well, we're just getting things done as opposed to writing a report. Like say,
Pause it. You hear that? Larry Kudlow thought that there was going to be a report, that they were actually studying whether there was fraud and waste and abuse and this and that. Like, have you actually assessed this? And Musk is just saying, "Oh, we're not assessing anything. We're going in with an assumption." Well, this is how they justify it. Look, the bottom line is, in Project 2025, back in 2023, Donald Trump was talking about how he didn't have to follow the Impoundment Control Act. Project 2025 wrote up this plan a year ago, but it's been, what's his face? Ding Dong, Rick Perry was talking about cutting 3 agencies. I can't remember the third. This is just knee-jerk republicanism. The only difference is that Musk has so much money that he's making the power in the Republican lawmakers keep quiet about what he's doing, and they seem impervious to or don't care about public opinion, and so they're just going in to cut. And then, this is the ultimate shoot first, ask questions later. And Kudlow thinks there's going to be a report. Oh, no, we don't account for things. We just put stuff up on a website and then take it down as it's wrong.
Final report, middle of next year?
Well, we're just getting things done as opposed to writing a report. Like say, reports don't mean anything. You got to actually take action. So the waste report in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. So that's like the big one to eliminate, because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year. That is also a mechanism by which the Democrats attract and retain illegal immigrants by essentially paying them to come here, and then turning them into voters.
Yes.
So this is why the Democrats are so upset about the situation.
Okay. This is such an unmitigated lie. It's hard to express. First off, he's talking about cutting it because supposedly there are undocumented immigrants who are getting Social Security, what he calls entitlements. The fact is that immigrants, undocumented immigrants, pay anywhere between $25 billion and $60 billion into Social Security. How do they do this? They use fake Social Security numbers, and oddly enough, and most efficiently, the government, when you pay taxes, or when they withhold taxes from you, or when the employer pays taxes because you're doing work for them, they don't scrutinize your Social Security number that much. They put it in there. If it bounces back, it bounces back. But when it comes time to pay out, if you're an undocumented immigrant and you go in there and you give them a fake Social Security number, guess what happens? You're going to be in trouble. And so undocumented immigrants do not collect Social Security. They do not collect Medicare. All they do is pay in because that's the price of them doing business. So they actually are a net positive. If you were to strip, and I don't know how you would do it, other than maybe to put the onus on employers to do it, and they will not, Republicans will not do that. They always pretend they will. But if you were to put the onus onto into employers, you would prevent undocumented immigrants from paying into Social Security. If you were able to do that, you would find that the Social Security Trust Fund would deplete earlier than it is set to now. This is just one of the lies that Elon Musk is perpetrating, that Republicans have perpetrated. And, a lot of people have said, like, those people in the Jubilee video were completely ignorant. And largely, yes. I don't know how representative they are of everybody that age in the Republican Party. This thing shot out in L.A. There's a specific type of people, and there's, you know, some of these people are a little bit thirsty, and but the ignorance about Social Security runs deep. And then when it doesn't, it's really just a problem with the idea of taxation. Now, there's a couple of things that I got to correct of myself in this video.
So what if Social Security should go away? That's my question to you.
Because Social Security keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. And not only does it keep our elderly out of poverty, it's essentially a social insurance program that protects you if at the end of your life you don't have enough money to survive.
For
And
right
so-
now, do you know that it's also the albatross around?
Pause it. I should also add, Social Security disability insurance, something slightly different, helps if you cannot earn money. Social Security also provides for orphans and widowers and widows. So it across the board, but largely it's essentially a social insurance program for your retirement. All right, go back just a little bit. This guy thinks it shouldn't exist, and now he's switching to it's an albatross.
Wow,
it's an albatross. Again, not refuting that it keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty, not refuting that by doing so also allows people his age and slightly older to not have to keep their parents out of poverty.
Real albatross.
This is so albatrossy.
Parents in poverty.
Go ahead. Program that protects you if at the end of your life you don't have enough money to survive.
For right now, do you know that it's also the albatross around our generation's neck?
No, it isn't.
Okay, so
let me just explain this.
Well, you're
Let me
going to
explain this
go
to you.
back to lecturing me about Social Security.
Well,
we don't
that's
have.
what we're talking about. Social
Yeah,
Security.
Social Security is one of the top 3 funded.
Social Security is almost the biggest thing that our government does.
Exactly, and we are more than $30 trillion in debt.
Well, first of all, Social Security cannot contribute legally to the deficit.
Because they don't even account it in the federal deficit every year.
That's correct,
We have
because
30
it's
years. We're
self-funding. When Social Security started in 1936, you have more workers than retirees because people haven't entered into retirement. By 1970, it was at 3.5 to 1. Now it's at 2.5 to 1. We should say they did a weird cut here, which is I didn't catch the before, but he's talking about we have a problem where there's a different number of workers per retirees. He says, do you know what it was when the program started? 450 to 1, which, yes, that's true. Because you had the first generation of people entering into retirement to qualify for Social Security. But again, by 1970, it was 3.5 workers to 1 retiree. And 50 years later, it is 2.5 workers for every retiree. But the difference over those 50 years is productivity. The amount that those workers can now produce and how much revenue they can generate has increased dramatically. But you say, how come we're going to have cuts? And the trust fund's going to run out in 2035, 2034. That's because of wealth disparity, but I'll explain that in a moment. It was at 3.5 to 1. Now it's at 2.5 to 1. But productivity has increased during that time, so the amount of money paid into Social Security has been up there. The reason why we are running out of money just for the trust fund, not for Social Security, like I say, if we do nothing with Social Security now, it is statutorily unable to contribute to the debt. The math is right there. The reason why the trust fund is running out is because wealth inequality has hoarded so much money above the cap.
You don't think it's because the government does a terrible job managing their money? They have a huge spending problem, and they go, look at all this money we have for Social Security that's earmarked for 60 years from now that we're just going to spend on something right now.
40 years ago, they predicted this. This is an actuarial table. Accountants sit sit there and look at it. This is a very easy math problem.
Accountants in the government are always right? That's totally the thing that you're saying? That they're always correct about money, right? That's why we have a $40 trillion debt problem.
Pause it. First off, the idea, and I don't know, I may end up saying this. I don't remember this segment that well. The idea that it's the government accountants can't add, and that's why we have a deficit or debt, is so bonkers. Like, with all due respect to accountants, if all you're doing is sort of like saying, we have this amount of money coming in and that amount of money going out, we can't figure out that math problem.
Calculator.
No, it is because you have basically a Republican Party saying, well, that money that's coming in, let's not have as much of that. Let's give some of that back to the billionaires.
Let rich people have less albatross around their neck.
But we still want to provide services, and we still want to provide defense contracts, and we still want to privatize all these services. I mean, that's what's going on here. Good.
But they're always correct about money, right? That's why we have a $40 trillion debt problem.
The problem isn't the math with the $40 trillion debt problem. It's you have tax
It's
cuts.
the spending problem. I totally agree with you, which
Social
I would argue is
Security-
part of why Social Security's gone in the hole already.
That's simply not true.
Oh, okay. So we're out of money from the Social Security bucket.
No. Statutorily, by that I mean by law, Social Security pays for itself. If we do nothing, the 6.2% that your employer and your employee pays into it will pay out 78% of benefits starting in 2033. That guy is wrong. I don't know where he got this 78% figure, but I've noticed in other things around January, he was quoting 78%. The actual number is 83% it's going to pay out. I don't know why I got on this jag around that time where I saw 78% written somewhere, but I went and checked it. It is 82 to 83%. Now, again, that's the intermediate assumption. Things that affect this assumption is how well our economy does. If there's a big jump or drop in life expectancy, et cetera, et cetera. But it's closer to 82 to 83% of Social Security benefits will be paid out if we do nothing. Good. To it will pay out 78% of benefits starting in 2033.
And why is it going down? If everything's so much better, why is it only 78%?
If we raise the cap, there's a cap right now at $176,000. So, for instance, if you make $100,000, you pay $6,200 into that.
A year,
A year. But if you make $4 million, do you know how much money you pay into Social Security? $6,200.
And so why should wealthy people pay a higher percent?
That was also I was also wrong there. It really should be 6.2% of $172,000 that you pay if you make $4 million. A slight discrepancy. If any of these people or any of these right-wingers who wanted to take an issue, that's what they would say. But they would also still see that it's incredibly unfair that you pay taxes on the full $172,000, $176,000 you make under the cap. But if you make $4 million, you still only pay for the first $172,000 as opposed to the entire $4 million. Go ahead.
Why should wealthy people pay a higher percentage?
No, they should pay the same percentage. 6.2 on $400,000, 6.2 on $1 million.
And why should they pay even more money at all? Because they make more money? Again, you fundamentally have this idea that because somebody makes more money, that's fundamentally wrong, right?
No, I don't think it's fundamentally wrong. I think that they should pay more taxes into it. Now,
it's amazing there because you're not actually even arguing for progressive taxation here. You're arguing for a flat tax.
Yes.
And what is the current situation is a huge tax break that it gives a sweet deal to the exact same
Social
people
Security is a flat
of.
tax. Social Security payroll tax is a flat tax. And he just doesn't like the idea of rich people paying taxes. Now, maybe he's super rich, or maybe he just thinks it's wrong, but he also perceives it. And this is the thing that I think ran through a lot of these people. And this is the problem with this religious fundamentalism. It breeds an authoritarianism. It breeds a hierarchy and this notion. And like, to his mind, if you tax somebody, it's punishment. Why are you punishing the people who make money? Why do you hate them so much? Like their whole mindset, even if I don't think this guy's a fundamentalist, he might have been, but even if they're not, they have adopted this same mindset. And understand, religious fundamentalism is authoritarianism. That's what it is, right? You cannot. God sets down the law as communicated to you by your pastor or whatever it is, or your priest or your Opus Dei, whoever it is. They pass it down and you do not question it. Now, if you happen to be one of the lucky ones, you're not the one who's being subjugated. You're a subjugator. But the whole religious fundamentalism is where the authoritarianism comes from. And the whole notion that you're punishing these wealthy people by having them be subject to the exact same tax as someone who's not wealthy would be. That's punishment.
Right?
No, I don't think it's fundamentally wrong. I think that they should pay more taxes into it. Now, I do think as a society, we should not allow billionaires. So, for instance,
can pay more taxes generally. But why should
the
they?
highest tax rate
hang on.
and the greatest expansion of our economy?
Hang on. Does a
country?
Billionaire get more money from Social Security if they went to go take it than I would?
No,
of course not. So why should they pay more?
I'll tell you what. Because it is a social insurance program that keeps you from being in poverty when you're a senior. And the reason why I think billionaires should pay more taxes than other people, even a higher percentage, is because it works better for society. The greatest expansion we've had in this country in terms of economics and the least amount of wealth disparity was in the 40s and 50s and 60s in this country. Do you know what the top marginal rate was?
It was high.
Do you know what it
I don't
was?
know the exact number, but
if you made over $470,000 in 1955, every dollar you would make above that was taxed at 90%.
So I have a question.
90 cents on every dollar was taxed above 470. So if we had today's dollars,
which is wild, by the way. But
it's also the greatest expansion we had of the economy.
Yeah, you can expand for a time, and then you see places. You see like Nordic countries that were like, oh, let's tax the hell out of our rich people, right? And then they go, whoops, we messed up. We can't actually live off of our terrible. We basically are able to live off our economic boom that they had between like the 40s and the 90s, and then we have to revert all of that because we made a terrible choice and we were able to have a party for 50 years until we realized we ran through all the money that capitalism.
I would love to have a party for 50 years. Where do we sign up for the party for 50 years? And now it's just like
this guy would love Bill Clinton.
Still sort of like a party, just not as big of a party. So we've gone 90 or 100 years. Incidentally, just for folks who are keeping track at home, this country is not even 300 years old. It would be pretty good to have a party for 100 years.
It was a party when wages tracked to productivity, and then all of a sudden stopped at the period this guy said people like Ronald Reagan realized, oh, we're doing the wrong thing with all these government
Once neoliberalism kicked in, it sort of ruined the party, it sounds like.
That was us realizing we were on the wrong track. I think it was us taking the wrong route.
Go ahead.
We made a terrible choice and we were able to have a party for 50 years until we realized we ran through all the money that capitalism got us. So let me ask you real quick. So the average...
All right, pause it. Now you can see right there, I am literally... Wait a second. You just said the Nordic countries had a party for 50 years by taxing taxing their wealthiest people, and it was a party that was brought to you by capitalism. Is he talking about the taxation there? I'm trying to
it's weird.
Figure out what half the time I have to say, and people don't understand. They cut out a couple of people who were completely I don't know what they were talking about. I literally sat there. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
You can tell he only exists in propaganda, because why do you start talking about Nordic countries? Like, you start talking about Europe, then it's not capitalism. You talk about the Marshall Plan and stuff like that. But America has a history where it was, like you said, way more productive. The economy was way more dynamic when rich people were taxed way higher rates.
This is the thing I noticed. This is the thing I notice about these people that I think may be a function of, this may be self-selecting, but there's a similar trait to all the libertarians that I've debated before. And that is like, they keep moving to sort of like theoretical things on some level. They cannot stay in the concrete world. Like the guy who wanted to prove to me that religious fundamentalism and theocracy is better than whatever it is that I am, because in some type of hypothetical logic theoretical world, he has more basis for his morality than I do. Well, okay, dude, let's just decide on like whether the country wants to subjugate women, whether we want to have a king, right? Because I mean, kings, that's what religion basically does, is it says that there are certain people who get the benefit of society. And maybe over time that spreads out a little bit, right? Like, goes from the king and the dukes and the whatever, the barons to the families. And then, of course, once you get to the families, it's the men. Go ahead.
Capitalism got us. So let me ask you real quick. So the average person, right? Right now, they fundamentally look at Social Security, young people like me, and they go, I'm going to have that money sitting, waiting for me when I retire. Since your opinion is whatever works best for the average person is better, wouldn't you rather shift towards something that I would agree with, which is getting people that are 19, 20 years old into funding their own retirement rather than relying on other people to fund it for them?
Like the 401k.
Sure. Well, not just the 401k, but IRAs, any other type of retirement. Would you agree? Would we agree with that?
Social Security was set up as part of a three-legged stool where back in the day when I was a kid, we had defined benefit pensions, where you know how much money you would get out. Yeah. That all shifted in the 80s to define contribution, where you know how much you put in. The 401k started during that Reagan era. It has been a disaster because the fact of the matter, for better or for worse, people just don't save in the way that you're talking about.
Why?
It would be nice if
the government were changing the mindset and actually pushing that.
Pause it. Now here's one of the big reasons that people don't save. Bradley, will you put up onto the thing, Google how much money, spare cash do Americans have? We have huge credit card debt, and that is because people don't have the money to fund their lives. This is the Search Labs AI. The median American family has approximately $8,000 in transaction accounts, including savings. The average savings balance across different age groups ranges from $11,000 to $60,000 in ages 65 to 74. Now, how are people supposed to be trained at age 19 and 20 to put away? There's some people who are going to do it, but I suggest it's those people who can afford to save that. The vast, overwhelming amount of people who are able to save money in their teens, late teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, are people who come from a rich family.
The economy is structurally against working people. And when he talks about wealthy people versus non-wealthy people in this country are like CEOs and investors and people close to that. People who work for a living actually make the value in this country that it lines all of those people's pockets. So yes, they should pay a lot more in taxes. It should be redistributed to the people that actually create the wealth in this country, which is not investors and CEOs. It is the workers beneath them.
And again, even if it was possible, physically possible for 50% for 100% of the population to be able to save because they have extra cash at the end of the week or the month or whatever it is. And it's probably closer to like really only that opportunity is only available to 50% at most, probably closer to 40%. They even physically could be able to do it. you're going to basically say to those people, if you didn't do it 20 or 40 years ago, cat food for you now that you're 65.
And you talk about albatross. Think of all the children of those people having watch their parents die in dignity or with lack of dignity.
Incidentally, and this is a good point, Holtenheim says, if everyone saved a quarter to a third of their income for retirement, our economy would crash out like nothing we've ever seen.
Again, it doesn't work. People just saving and having savings, like people need to work for an economy to go.
Now, if you're working on the stock market, you want that money to come in to the stock market because then you make a ton of fees. That's why they want to privatize it. All that fees. Go ahead.
It'd be nice if
if the government were changing the mindset and actually pushing that cultural shift towards, we're not just going to hand you money when you're 65.
Now, wait a second. Now, these guys, again, they can't stand government overreach, but they want the government to fundamentally change people's mindset.
It's Grindset Month, brought to you by the United States government.
We had this situation 100 years ago where there was no Social Security. And the government, presumably, unless he's talking about like having like some type of like one every day at 6 o'clock, everybody tunes into their TV and they get hypnotized into the savings mindset. If he's just saying like, you're on your own, everybody, we could go back 100 years and test this proposition. There's a reason why Social Security exists. It's because we did test this proposition and it was a disaster.
Uncle Sam wants you to start drop shipping.
And actually pushing that cultural shift towards, we're not just going to hand you money when you're 65. You have to plan for right now.
We've had a 40-year experiment with the government affecting the cultural mindset, and it failed.
We've had a 40-year experiment of everybody. You know what my parents say? Do you know what grandparents say? They go, well, I'm just waiting for my Social Security check to come in, rather than I have $800,000 waiting for me because I thought about it when I was 19 and 20 because I didn't have this grab bag of money waiting for me. You're assuming that young people.
I try and tell my kids.
So we agree. We should get rid of Social Security and phase it out. Well, no. So we should phase out. How would you listen to this idea? You phase out Social Security to where people who have 5 years left before they retire get 100% of the benefits, and then people like me who have 40 years until we retire, I'm not going to get it.
Well, aside from the fact that he just left out like 35 years worth of people in between there. Again, we've run this experiment. And the reason why Social Security is so overwhelmingly popular is because his experiment doesn't work. There's no inhibition. If it is so easy for people to save 6% of their paycheck each week, month, whatever it is, why would it be difficult for people to save 10%? So 6.2% goes into Social Security. It's matched by your employer, incidentally. And then you do 4%, and you put that in the stock market. What's wrong with that plan? What's wrong with that plan? They don't suggest that. Apparently, it's just the first 6.2% is so easy to get people to save on their own. But then after that, it's some type of magic elixir, and you can't go past that. They don't suggest it because what they want is a Hunger Games situation. He just stated it right there. My grandparents are sitting, I'm waiting till I get to Social Security. Well, Grandpa, maybe you should be thinking about how you're going to be at a greeter at Walmart when you're 65.
Did he just say his grandparents have hundreds of thousands of dollars?
No, he said, wouldn't it be better if they had $800,000?
Yeah, economies don't work. Capitalism can't do that for people, you child. It doesn't work like that.
Go ahead.
Me, who have 40 years until we retire, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to get screwed either way.
No,
you really think I'm going to get Social Security someday?
I guarantee you, at the very least, you're going to get 78% of your benefit.
82. That's awesome. I'll get $9,000 a year. That's great.
In calling for our government to increase the cap, in fact, get rid of the cap, then your grandkids will get Social Security.
I would much rather, and again, maybe we'll just disagree, but I would much rather result to, hey, 20-year-olds, please save for your own retirement, invest for your own retirement.
That'll
because
do
the
it.
government is bad at dealing with money.
And that'll
Don't
do
rely
it.
on them.
That'll do it.
What happens if what?
What happens if those 20-year-olds don't listen to you?
The same thing that happens if a 20-year-old just doesn't go and get a job because I tell them to.
No.
They're going to have a problem, but that's not my fault.
No, I got news for you. It's not your fault, but there used to be in New York City 30,000 people sleeping
No one
on
in
the
this
Bowery
room was alive before Social Security. We've all lived under this, just like that
and it
income tax.
has been the most successful government program in the history of our government.
Things that are successful don't just start to die out and end up in the.
It's not dying out.
It's the grab bag of money, the massive excess that was there in the early years because of the 42-to-1 beneficiary.
There wasn't a massive excess in 1936.
42-to-1
Dude,
is
a
massive excess.
There weren't that many people who had entered into the Social Security program.
And the fact that
in 1970 it was 3.5 workers to 1. Now it's 2.5, but productivity has increased it. I've told you why the Social Security Trust Fund is running out. It is because of wealth disparity. Billionaires hiding and hoarding their money above the cutoff line, which is 176,000. That's the cap. If you remove the cap,
hoarding their money.
Your grandkids
Billionaires aren't keeping $2 billion under their mattress. They're investing it back into.
They're just putting it into some stock market, or they're just looking around.
And what do you think a
crypto
401k or an IRA relies upon? It relies on the stock market and things like that.
A 401k relies on the stock market, and I knew people who were retaring in 2008 when the stock market tanked and they got screwed.
Well, that's a whole other problem. I would argue that's largely driven by the government being, once again, terrible with policy and creating bad economic hazards.
Social Security is there regardless of what happens with the stock market.
That young man has one idea that his brain is geared towards at any given moment, which is that the libertarian things, I believe, aren't fairy tales, which they are.
Yep. Wow. Well, I didn't realize.
You love billionaires.
I didn't realize how much I got to talk about Social Security on that. I had forgotten about that. All right. Oh, fuck. Let's take one phone call, 3 minutes, and that's it. Sorry, got to be quick. Calling from a 978 area code. Sorry, I made everybody hold on. 978.
Hi, is this me?
Yes, it is you. You are the sole caller of the day.
Hi, my name's Tabitha. I'm from Central Massachusetts.
Tabitha from Central Mass? Like where in Central Mass, if you don't mind?
Just north of Worcester. I'm from Holden.
Sweet. I know Holden. Pinecroft?
Yeah, I'm on the other side of Holden, but yeah.
All right. That's where the best ice cream is. All right, go ahead.
I'm calling about my son, actually. My son is 13, and he's trans. And I wanted to first say thank you for all of the coverage that you guys have done on trans issues. But the main reason I wanted to call is because I wanted to kind of clarify what being trans as a teenager really means, because Republicans do a lot of fear-mongering, and I've been called like an abuser of my child and horrible things. And they say that, it's a mental illness and things like that. So really quickly, my son's a trans boy, so I can only really speak for Massachusetts, and I can only really speak for trans boys, so I don't know if it's different for trans girls, or I'm sure it's different in other areas. But in Massachusetts, at least, you can't go on hormone replacement therapy, or at least testosterone. Again, it might be different for trans girls, until you're 14. They just won't let you. And you can't just walk into a doctor's office and be like, my kid is trans, and then they're like, okay, and just give you trans surgeries like that day. It's a process. My son's been in therapy for over a year now, and he goes to the gender clinic, which is basically just an office in UMass where they do a whole bunch of other things for kids that have nothing to do with gender as well. It's not really its own clinic. And before they decide, what's the best for your kid, they do blood work where they, test their levels, their hormone levels for different things. They do a bone density scan to see how far into puberty they are. So, like in my son's case, it was determined that puberty blockers actually wouldn't really benefit him at all because at the time he was 11 years and 11 months old, and then when they did his bone age, his bone age was 15, so he was already mostly through puberty. So puberty blockers, if you're almost done with puberty, the puberty blockers aren't going to do anything. So the only real medical, quote-unquote, gender-affirming care that he gets is birth control, which any cisgendered girl could get. He gets that to help with his periods. And then he goes to therapy. And then every 3 months we go to the doctors and they see how he's doing and they update us on, policies and different things. And other than that, he gets the same exact care that our non-transgender son does. Right. We let him cut his hair the way he wants. We let him wear the clothes that he wants. We let him go by the name that he wants to go by. And it's literally no different. And, he's a good kid. He's got straight A's. He does after-school clubs. He's class president. He's thriving. And I don't say any of that to imply that he wouldn't be deserving of rights if he wasn't thriving or if he was struggling. But my point is, it's not like a mental illness. He's not like this in this horrible state, and we're not abusing him. We're literally just letting him be a kid, and we're literally raising him the same exact way that we're raising our other son. We just call him what he wants to be called. Oh, and the main thing I'd like to point out is all these parents that support schools outing kids. If your kid is coming out to their school or their teacher first before their family, there's a reason for that. Our son came to us and our older son first. We told the school what was going on. They didn't have to tell us, Right. And when he came out to us, we just asked him, okay, what does that look like for you? And what do you want? Do you want the school to know? Do you want your friends to know? Do you want it to just be family? And we basically just let him lead the charge. And I really wish that more people understood that he's not that different from any of his other friends or from any of the other kids. He's just a kid.
Well, Tabitha, thanks for sharing your story. You sound like great parents, and I'm glad your kid is thriving. That's as a parent, that's all that you really want for your child.
Yeah, and it's like we feel lucky and grateful that we're in Massachusetts because, most of the people are great here. And I worry about kids that are in other areas, but it's still scary. When your kid comes home from school crying because he doesn't know if he's going to have to, be called something else at school tomorrow, or he doesn't know, what, like he came home from school the day of the election when Trump was inaugurated. Not inaugurated, on the day when Trump won the election, and he was like, the president of the United States doesn't think I should exist. And it's like, how do you deal with that,
Was he and your family heartened at least by Worcester becoming a sanctuary city?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're very happy about that. And his counselor, his therapist, is great and keeps us informed by a lot of things. And my son is a very, well-informed kid. He's a tiny little 13-year-old activist. So he was stoked about that.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for the call. I really appreciate it. And, good luck to you guys. I can't thank you enough for sharing the story.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's why you take one call a day, at least. All right. We're going to do some IM, so do 10 and get going. We had a lot to talk about today. Sort of been like that for a couple of weeks.
Sure, we'll slow down.
Several months. Several years. Casey from OK, please cover Representative Larson's comments in the committee hearing. It's exactly what we need from Democrats. It made me emotional yet hopeful. Not familiar with which it is, but if you know, send us an email with the where it was. Number 13, the South, full of red states, is disproportionately black. This is about white supremacy, and they're willing to die for it. So there are not many options to deal with these people outside of finality. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but hopeful one, mass, represent. I have thought about Keating before I gave up major props. I can't leave mass. Rodney from Omaha. Well, there's a lot of these. Hey, Sam, I'm beyond frustrated and angry with you and your behavior, not just you, not just MR staff, but people in general. Instead of crashing out, I've kept working. I've emailed the first part of my frustration as analysis of past MR videos that have had fruitful points, but not communicated well. It may seem random, but we're all in a rut. And if we don't get in contact, we're going to stay in that rut. First header, first analysis send. Don't let the bigotry towards you hurt you. Okay, well, thank you. I'm not sure I follow that. But, you know, people have to understand, like, the fact that we finish the show every day at 3 o'clock is reflective of how much material that we have. But understand the ratio of material that gets presented on the show that we consume over the course of a day is somewhere like 6 to 1. So you can do the math. We also got to sleep and eat, make dinner for the kids. So, like, if we don't get to every email and service your specific email, just understand that, you know, we're doing our best. And Benora, we will never see a day in which, no matter if someone somehow they retake the Congress and the presidency, the Democrats would dare to significantly attempt, even if they could, which they probably can't, roll back all this Trump destruction. It will be exactly the same as them never rolling back the George W. Bush tax cuts, only making excuses about the Louis DeJoy, then proclaiming him their friend. Only Republican pass. I mean, there is no doubt the implications of these 4 years, even if you know, Rashida Tlaib or AOC or, you know, gets elected 4 years from now, to recover from this is going to take a decade. I mean, this is why we were so adamant about the stakes associated with this. There may be some things that progress further. And also, let me just add this. You never know. Yeah. You never know. So I would say your doom saying is 80% likely, 75% likely. But I would also say Donald Trump had a 5% chance, 2% chance of winning in 2016. So
capitalists were in a very strong position in the 1920s as well.
Right. Doesn't Trump's actions also serve centrist Dems, rich, good billionaire donors? Could that be explain their silence and lack of action? I mean, I suspect that is part of the incentive structure. But it really is just sort of like a combination of things. Like, for some, more so than others. For the ones in the sort of the middle, it may be one tide that's acting upon them. And then there's also just sort of like risk averseness. I mean, if you work in a company, surely you see this type of behavior everywhere. Alex from Rhode Island, this kid's just filibustering you, stepping on you every time you make a good point that doesn't sink into the audience. They all sort of did that.
So Tim Pool did. It's kind of what they do.
Any primers? When he was taken aback, was Black Bag head over involved? Because I have heard a lot of things about that being not good. When he was taken. Militant apathy. Dana White hugging and dapping the tape rape boys at an MMA march is peak 2025. Indeed. All right, two more. Iowa Ryan. Rush Limbaugh trained conservatives better. These new conservatives learn from Rogan and it leaves them lacking. I've been finding they can't take a fight anymore and they submit. Well, they also don't have to win right at the moment. And the final I am of the day. Kentucky leftist. Fundamentally, the bearded Crowder clone doesn't fundamentally have a clue of what he's fundamentally talking about. It's just talking point story hour. These guys have no interest in actual conversation on this stuff. They were all trying to get their 20-second viral clip on the great Sam Seder. I am so glad you took just one call. That call was amazing. Made me cry. Can you please clip it? We will. That 13-year-old is going to be a congressman one day, folks. Wait, aren't most Democrats corrupt too and funded by the same engine as Republicans? Welcome to the program, IMer. You must be new here. Bradley, Matt, Emma, and Abstentia, great job, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot lights shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost me